I got this in the mail, man.
Well, you gonna play it?
Might as well. Let's see.
Greetings, Carlos. Your next assignment for your group is threefold. It begins tonight in a section of the big city known as the Bronx. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to spoil the advancement of a group of men known as the Yankees trying to claim the eastern area. It's a tough task, Carlos. Good luck.
No mission. It's impossible.
Tigers teammates and best buddies Carlos Pena and Craig Monroe hope the next 3 nights in the Big Apple will be anything but a mission impossible. And tonight the Tigers make their first visit to New York to face the Yankees.
This is the Baseball Rewind podcast. We are back and we are better than ever. I'm Wyatt Baumeyer. I'm joined by my co-host Charlie Jacobs. It is wonderful to be back, and we couldn't like to have it any other way.
Absolutely, Wyatt. After almost a year, Baseball Rewind is returning for Season 2, and we're going to take a look at 3 more interesting baseball stories. You know how it goes, folks, so really excited for that. But Wyatt, it sounds like a lot has happened since our last episode almost a year ago. You know, by the time you're listening, this might be in the past, but what's on Friday, Wyatt?
Well, if I do recall, last year we did make an episode about the Houston Astros cheating scandal. Unfortunately, those Astros have made the World Series for a second consecutive season. We very much hope here at New Trier that our Fightin' Phils will win. But unfortunately, I believe that the Astros will win in 5 games. What about you, Charlie?
I'm going Astros in 6. I'm giving the Phillies a little more credit than you are, I think. Exactly.
Well, we'll see. Well, besides the World Series, baseball has been very interesting. We saw the Dodgers win 111 games, which I believe was close to a National League record. I believe it was the modern day record for wins. Cubs in 1907, Cubs, I believe, have the record of all time. It's 116, tied with the 01 Mariners. But besides that, it was a very thrilling season, I would say.
Yeah, how about that history being made with the Mariners' first playoff appearance since 2001?
They may have gotten swept, but we're not going to talk about that.
Ending their long drought. And like you said, a couple of big upsets this season. So if you're a Cubs fan, however, 2022 was not your year. But you really should not be complaining about that, because in this first episode of Season 2, we're going to take a look back at one of the worst teams in modern MLB history. Actually, the second worst team to be precise. So, Wyatt, time for the big reveal. Which team was it?
Well, if we do go back to the year of our Lord in 2003, the world of baseball was completely different. The Montreal Expos still existed. There was a certain team in Cleveland that had an old name. And most importantly, there was a very, very bad team in the American League. And that team was, drumroll, the 2003 Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, unsurprising to most fans, before this season even started, the 2003 Detroit Tigers weren't ever supposed to be good. Coming off a 106-loss season back in 2002, the sky was as dark as it had ever been over the Motor City. But what followed next could be considered an abomination by baseball fans, the worst baseball season in American League history.
Let's rewind.
Whenever the calendar turns to March, there is an excitement in the baseball community. Well, that is unless you were a 2003 Detroit Tigers fan. A year after their failed run for the playoffs, the Tigers had expanded their postseason drought to 15 seasons as they began a rebuilding year.
Well, at this point in time, there was very little hope for the future in Detroit, as the Tigers had a bottom 10 farm system in place. The fan base also had a very strong hatred towards their longtime GM, David Dombrowski, who is currently the Phillies manager. They're in the World Series. Not to mention the fact that the team had absolutely no talent on their big league roster. This was going to be an absolutely horrific season for Detroit.
The Tigers began the season on, as expected, a cold note, losing their first 9 games and affirming the fears of many fans. They would go on to finish the month of April with a record of 1-17 and would head into June with a record of only 14-39. By the All-Star break, they were 25-67, which, to put nicely, is a disappointing record, Wyatt.
The roots of the problem ran very deep within the Detroit Tigers organization. First-year manager Alan Trammell had little experience, and the front office did not help him at all, signing no notable free agents over the offseason. Instead, they lost many team players and team stars, such as starter Jeff Weaver, closer Juan Aversio, and star third baseman Dean Palmer.
There were, on the other hand, some players who put together strong seasons. Designated hitter Dimitri Young put together a .297 batting average with 29 home runs, which is still a respectable number.
Indeed.
Meanwhile, pitcher Jamie Walker stood out with a .332 earned run average in 78 appearances, which was actually the second most innings pitched in the American League during that season. So they still had some standout players despite the struggles.
This year, his motto is, I'm going to make that pitcher get me out. I'm not going to get myself out.
Good motto. That ball is belted in the air, deep right center field, way back, and that ball is gone.
He's got the flat down.
And there's number 1 on the season for Dimitri Young.
So, after finishing September with a record of 9-18, the pain had finally ceased. The Tigers had just completed the 12th worst season based on winning percentage and the second worst record in the modern baseball era, trailing only the 1962 Mets, who were in their first year of existence.
Now, luckily for Detroit fans who are rightfully happy for the season to be over, things did get better. Over the course of the offseason after 2003, the Tigers greatly improved. They acquired talents in all aspects of the game, current and future stars like Hall of Famers Ivan Rodriguez and Carlos Guillen. They would finish the upcoming 2004 season with a much, much improved 72-90 record.
I'd say that's improved.
Which improved again, and they won an AL pennant in 2006, proving that despite a season of struggles, a team can learn valuable lessons.
Now, unfortunately, they did lose that 2006 World Series. They lost to a Cardinals team led by famous manager Tony La Russa. That Cardinals team only won 82 games, but somehow snuck in, and they won. And now, if we go forward in time, come to today, we realize that, hey, what's changed? I mean, for Detroit, things have not gotten better, Charlie. I mean, they have not recovered, really, from these deeply rooted issues. Their GM, Al Avila, was recently fired midway through this previous season, or past season. Their postseason drought also happens to be one of the longest in the major leagues. And hopefully, I'm not a Tigers fan, but hopefully in the coming years, Detroit will turn things around because they got some very young players. They got Spencer Torkelson, a very good young first baseman. They got our lovely shortstop, Javier Baez. And, that's about it right now. Things are not looking good in Detroit. And, I mean, there must be something with Detroit sports because none of those teams are good.
Absolutely. Got the Lions, the Pistons, nothing great happening there. But I think the most important thing is just how a team can learn lessons from, their ownership, the management, even players, and realize that obviously their lack of investment is probably one of the deepest rooted causes of the 2003 season.
Well, you're 100% right, Charlie. All problems in sports always seem to start with the managers, the people on the field. But in reality, it's all up top with management and ownership. Because at the end of the day, who's making all the executive decisions? It's the owners. So we should stop blaming all of our managers for these very deeply rooted problems. It's got to start up top with management and ownership. So if I'm mad at my team, I'm going to the owner. Who cares if they probably don't care about my opinion, but at the end of the day, they're the ones making the decisions. And hopefully in Detroit, things will be turning around quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else we mentioned is this was meant to be a rebuilding season for the Tigers. And over the long term, it really wasn't because they didn't ever they won a pennant, but they didn't ever win a World Series and they didn't get long-term success. And obviously the goal of a rebuild is long-term success. Detroit was able to get 1 or 2 good seasons, but in essence, in the bigger picture of things, the rebuild was not what you would call a success.
Well, that's the big risk, Charlie, when you try to rebuild. There's no guaranteed success. But I mean, there is a path to success there with a rebuild. The whole goal of a rebuild, folks, is, of course, to turn over your farm system, trade away all veterans, and kind of replenish it with younger talent. And most of the time, a rebuild will work if it's executed properly, but it can always fail. And, there's teams that did have successful rebuilds. Look at the 2016 Cubs. Look at the Astros, who are still a powerhouse. I mean, rebuilds do work, folks. It's just got to be executed properly. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. Stay tuned for another episode coming shortly. But for one final time, I'm Wyatt Baumeyer.
And I'm Charlie Jacobs. This has been the Baseball Rewind Podcast.
We'll see you later.